All right, so we're back for part 2 of our deep dive into the Qur'an. If you remember, we're doing this in 3 parts, and last time we got through the beginning. We got a feel for the overall tone and some key themes. This time we're going to be diving into verses 51 through 100.
That's right. And, building on those initial ideas, these next verses, they really kind of crank up the intensity, bringing us face to face with, the sheer power of Allah and the very real consequences of our choices.
Ooh, okay. You've got me intrigued. So we're not just getting more, philosophical musings here. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Think dramatic, almost like cinematic descriptions. So imagine you're in the desert. The wind's whipping around you. And then this voice booms out describing mountains being uprooted, the seas merging together, the sky splitting open.
Oh, okay. That's intense. I mean, like the Quran's trying to shake us awake, make us truly grasp the magnitude of what's being discussed.
Exactly. And it's not just, abstract imagery. We get these vivid descriptions of people being resurrected on Judgment Day. They're scattered like locusts. You can almost feel the chaos and the fear. It's meant to be a wake-up call, urging people to, reflect on their actions and turn towards righteousness.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this section builds on what we saw in the first part. There's that recurring theme of guidance. But now it's like, hey, pay attention. This stuff has serious weight.
Absolutely. And speaking of weight, we also revisit the story of Noah's Ark in the flood. It's a familiar tale, but here it serves as a stark reminder of what happens to those who reject Allah's message.
It's interesting, that the Quran revisits certain stories multiple times. It's like we're getting different lenses to view these events, each time emphasizing a different aspect. Why do you think the flood narrative is brought up again here, in this section focusing on consequences?
Well, the flood serves as the ultimate example of divine punishment for disbelief, wiping out an entire civilization that refused to heed Noah's warnings. It's a cautionary tale, underscoring the seriousness of rejecting Allah's message.
So it's not just about understanding the message, it's about taking it to heart and letting it guide your actions. Choices have consequences, and those consequences can be huge.
Exactly. And speaking of choices, these verses introduce us to a fascinating concept. The jinn.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. Aren't they like supernatural beings made of fire? Tell me more.
They're described as unseen beings created from smokeless fire, possessing free will just like humans. And what's fascinating is that we get a glimpse into their reaction to the Qur'an itself. There's this scene where a group of jinn hear the Qur'an being recited for the first time, and they are completely captivated by it.
It's like, a story within a story highlighting the sheer power of the Qur'an's message. It's so compelling that even these otherworldly beings are moved by it.
And what's even more interesting is that they choose to believe. They're not forced, they're not coerced. They hear the message and they decide to embrace it.
Okay, so that raises a big question for me. If these jinn have free will, does that mean humans do too? I mean, a lot of the earlier verses talked about Allah guiding us, almost like we're on a predetermined path.
You've hit upon one of the most profound and debated concepts in Islamic theology, the interplay between free will and divine decree. The Qur'an doesn't shy away from this complexity. It affirms Allah's complete knowledge and power, but also emphasizes the importance of individual choice and responsibility.
So it's not a simple either situation. It's more nuanced than that.
Exactly. The Qur'an seems to suggest that while Allah knows all, He also grants us the freedom to choose our path. Our actions have consequences, and we will be held accountable for them. There's this verse in Surah Al-Mujadilah that really drives this point home. It talks about how even our secret conversations and hidden thoughts are known to Allah.
Whoa, okay, so no hiding from the big guy upstairs. It's like a cosmic surveillance system. But seriously, that's kind of terrifying. Empowering at the same time, right? Every choice matters. Every action has weight.
Precisely. It emphasizes the seriousness of our choices and the need to live with awareness and intention.
Okay, so we've got, divine power on display, consequences for disbelief, mysterious jinn, making life choices. What else is in store for us in these verses?
Well, we also get these contrasting stories of individuals facing tests of faith. It's like the Quran is saying, hey, righteousness isn't automatic. It's a choice you have to make, even when it's hard.
Ooh, examples, please.
On one hand, we have Noah's wife and the wife of Lot. Both were married to righteous men, prophets even, but they betrayed their husbands and ultimately faced divine punishment. It's a harsh reminder that even being close to righteousness doesn't guarantee your own salvation.
Okay, that's heavy. So who are the examples on the other side? The ones who make the tough, righteous choice?
We have figures like the wife of Pharaoh, who, despite being married to a tyrant who opposed Moses, remained steadfast in her faith. And then there's Mary, mother of Jesus, who is portrayed as this paragon of piety and righteousness. These women, despite their challenging circumstances, made the choice to stand by their beliefs and ultimately found favor with Allah.
Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern here. Family ties, social standing, even being married to a prophet. None of that matters as much as your own individual choices. You're responsible for your own actions and your own relationship with Allah.
That's a powerful insight. And it really gets to the heart of what these verses are trying to convey. It's a message of personal responsibility and accountability, regardless of your circumstances.
Oh, all right. I'm definitely feeling the weight of these verses. So what's next? Where do we go from here?
Well, from here, the Qur'an takes us on this journey into the afterlife. And let me tell you, the descriptions are, well, let's just say they don't hold back.
Ooh, cliffhanger. All right, listeners, you'll have to come back for part 3 to hear about that. Okay, so last time we left off with some pretty heavy stuff: divine punishment, mysterious jinn, and the importance of individual choice. It feels like we're moving from big, sweeping pronouncements to a more focused look at how these ideas, how they play out in daily life.
You're picking up on a subtle but important shift here. These next verses in the Qur'an zoom in on the human experience, exploring the relationship between, humanity and the divine in a more grounded way. It's like we're moving from the cosmic stage to a more intimate setting.
So less about mountains crumbling and more about like how to actually live a righteous life.
Exactly. We start to see an emphasis on seeking knowledge, understanding Allah's signs, and striving for spiritual growth. It's not just about, blindly following rules, but about engaging with your faith and seeking a deeper understanding of Allah's message.
Okay, so give me an example. Where do we see this in action?
Well, we'll take Surah Al-Hadid, for example. It talks about iron being sent down by Allah. And at first glance, you might think, okay, what's so special about iron? But the Qur'an goes beyond, its physical properties, highlighting its use in warfare, its benefits for people, and hinting at the deeper significance of even seemingly mundane materials in Allah's plan.
It's like the Qur'an is saying, open your eyes. Everything around you, even something as basic as iron, could be a sign, a manifestation of Allah's power and wisdom.
That's a great way to put it. It encourages this sense of awe and wonder, urging us to see the divine in the everyday.
So it's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture behind the everyday stuff. I like that. It makes the idea of seeking knowledge feel more tangible, less abstract.
And then there's Surah Al-Mushadila, which offers a fascinating example of how even seemingly, ordinary events can hold profound spiritual lessons. It describes a situation where a woman approaches the Prophet Muhammad, pleading with him about her husband's unfair treatment.
Wait, so a domestic dispute ends up in the Qur'an? That's kind of surprising.
Right. But this seemingly personal matter becomes an opportunity to reveal broader messages about social justice, communication, and resolving disputes fairly. It's like the Qur'an is saying, look, even your everyday interactions, the way you treat your spouse, your family, your neighbors, it all matters. These aren't just personal issues. They have implications for the entire community.
Okay, so we're seeing this theme of individual actions having broader social implications.
Exactly. The Qur'an uses this real-life scenario to highlight ethical principles that apply to the entire community. It's a reminder that spirituality isn't just about, your personal connection with Allah. It's about how you live your life, how you interact with others, and the choices you make every single day.
I'm really struck by how the Qur'an weaves together these grand cosmic events with these very grounded human experiences. Mm-hmm. It's like it's saying, yes, there's a divine plan, there's judgment, there's an afterlife, but it all comes back to how you live your life right here, right now.
I think that's a key takeaway from these verses. They challenge us to see the divine in the everyday, to recognize that our actions have consequences both for ourselves and for the community, and to constantly strive for improvement.
And speaking of striving, one thing that keeps popping up in these verses is the emphasis on generosity and taking care of those in need. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of verses encouraging believers to give charity and support the less fortunate.
Yes, and it's not just presented as, a nice thing to do. It's presented as a fundamental obligation. Take Surah Al-Hashr, for instance. It deals with the exile of a Jewish tribe from Medina, and it specifically highlights the importance of distributing their abandoned possessions to the poor and needy.
So even in a situation of conflict and displacement, the Quran prioritizes social responsibility and ensuring that resources are used to help the most vulnerable.
It's like a blueprint for a just and equitable society where those who have more are obligated to care for those who have less. And it's not just about, material wealth, it's about generosity of spirit too. The Quran encourages kindness, forgiveness, compassion in our dealings with others.
It seems like these verses are really painting a picture of what a righteous life, what it looks like, both in terms of our individual actions and how we function as a community.
And to make that picture even more vivid, we get some pretty amazing descriptions of paradise in this section, particularly in Surah Ar-Rahman.
Ooh, paradise. Tell me about it. I need a little escape from all this talk about judgment and responsibility.
Well, imagine lush gardens, flowing rivers, delicious fruits. It's described as a place of abundance and sensory delight.
Sounds pretty amazing. But it's not just about material luxury, right?
Yeah. No, the Quran also emphasizes the spiritual rewards of paradise, like being in the presence of Allah and experiencing eternal peace and contentment. It's a state of ultimate fulfillment, both physically and spiritually.
Okay, that does sound pretty enticing. But of course there's the flip side, right? We can't talk about paradise without mentioning the warnings about hell.
Right. And those warnings get pretty intense in this section. Surah Al-Waqiah and Surah Al-Haqqah, for example, describe hell as a terrifying place of fire, chains, and unimaginable suffering. It's a stark reminder of the consequences of choosing a path of disbelief and wickedness.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Jinn, angels, stories of faith and punishment, glimpses of paradise and hell.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that keeps coming up, almost like a background theme, is the power of the Quran itself.
That's a really astute observation. Throughout these verses, we see a recurring emphasis on the Quran's, divine origin, its power to guide, and its role as a source of truth and wisdom. It's not just a book. It's presented as a living force.
Yeah, I remember that story about the jinn being moved by the Quran. It's like the text itself has this inherent power to impact people, even beings from other realms.
Right. It's almost like a meta-narrative within the text itself, demonstrating the Quran's ability to touch even the hearts of those who are not human. And we see this idea echoed in several verses where the Quran is described as a light, a guidance, a healing for the soul.
So it's not just about the stories and the teachings. It's about the words themselves having this transformative power.
Exactly. The Quran is presented as something to be deeply engaged with, pondered over, and internalized. It's a source of guidance for every aspect of life.
And speaking of guidance, I'm curious about how this section deals with the Prophet Muhammad's role.
Mm-hmm.
We know he faced a lot of opposition and even persecution in his lifetime. Do any of these verses speak to that experience?
Absolutely. Several verses address the challenges faced by the Prophet and offer encouragement and reassurance. Surah Al-Mudaththir, for example, instructs the Prophet to rise and warn his people, emphasizing the importance of perseverance in the face of adversity.
It's kind of comforting to know that even the Prophet faced doubts and hardships. It makes his example more relatable, more human.
And it reinforces the message that faith isn't about being perfect. It's about striving, persevering, and constantly seeking to align your life with Allah's will.
It feels like we're getting a more nuanced picture of the Prophet's experience here, not just the idealized version.
Yes, and this humanizes him and makes his struggles more relatable to ordinary believers. It's a reminder that everyone faces challenges, even prophets.
So we're seeing this theme of personal responsibility, the importance of generosity, the power of the Quran, and even a glimpse into the Prophet's struggles. What stands out to you the most from this section? What's the biggest takeaway so far?
For me, it's the emphasis on self-reflection and introspection. Throughout these verses, we're reminded to examine our motives, to consider the consequences of our actions, and to strive for continuous spiritual growth.
It's like the Quran is a mirror, reflecting back our inner selves and prompting us to constantly seek improvement.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think that's a powerful message for all of us, regardless of our beliefs. Taking the time to reflect on our choices, to understand our motivations, and to strive for greater understanding is a journey that can lead to profound personal growth.
And that feels like a great place to pause for now. What do you say?
Indeed. Join us for the final part of this deep dive into the Quran, where we'll explore the concluding verses and discuss what they reveal about the the ultimate message of this sacred text.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Quran. It's amazing to think that we've journeyed through so much of this text already. I mean, we've seen those dramatic scenes of divine power, gotten glimpses of paradise and hell.